"Who are they?" she asked, "and where have they come from?" He told her, and she advised him that when he arose in the morning, he should beat them without mercy. So when he arose in the morning, he grabbed his dreadful crabtree club and went straightway down into the dungeon to the prisoners. He began to beat them as if they were misbehaving dogs, although they had shown him no disrespect. The giant continued to beat them so severely that they were no longer able to try to protect themselves, or even to move upon the floor. Once he had finished, the giant walked out and left them there to commiserate over their misery and to mourn under their distress. So, for the rest of that day, heavy sighs and bitter cries occupied their time. The next night, Diffidence talked with her husband again about the prisoners. When she learned that they were still alive, she advised her husband to recommend to Christian and Hopeful that they commit suicide. In the morning, he went to the prisoners in the same gruff manner as before. When he saw they were in extreme pain because of the wounds he had inflicted the day before, he told them, "Since you are never likely to get out of this place, your best alternative is to make an end of yourselves. You can use a knife, noose, or poison. For why should you choose to live, seeing life is filled with so much bitterness?" The prisoners asked that he let them go. With that, the giant scowled as if he were ready to rush upon them to finish them off right then and there. But he fell into one of his fits, for he sometimes experienced seizures on sunshiny days, during which he lost the use of his hands for a time. Therefore, he withdrew from the dungeon and left the prisoners to consider what they should do. Christian and Hopeful talked between themselves as to whether it would be best to take the giant's advice or not, and it led into an intense conversation. "Brother," said Christian, "what shall we do? The life we now live in this place is miserable. For my part, I don't know whether it is better to live like this or to die by our own hand. My soul chooses strangling rather than life, and the grave seems more desirable for me than this dungeon, so that my soul would choose suffocation, death, rather than my pains." Job chapter 7, verse 15. Shall we accept the giant's device? Hopeful let out a thoughtful sigh. It is true that our present condition is dreadful, and death would be far more welcomed to me than to live in this continual misery. However, let us consider what the Lord of the country to which we are going has said. He declares, "You shall not commit murder," not just to another man's person, but we are forbidden to take the giant's advice to kill ourselves as well. Also, let us consider again that giant despair does not have authority over the law of our Lord. As far as I can understand, others have been captured by him just like we have, and yet they have escaped out of his hands. Who knows if perhaps God, who made the world, might cause the giant despair to die? Or that perhaps at some time or another in the future he may forget to lock us in, or that he may in the near future have another paralyzing fit while he is here with us in the dungeon, and then lose the use of his limbs. If that should ever come to pass again, for my part, I am determined to bolster my courage and to muster all my effort to escape from his hand. I was a fool not to have tried to do it earlier. However, my brother, let us be patient and continue to endure. The opportunity may come that could provide us with a happy release, but it shall not be by our own murders. With these words, Hopeful calmed Christian's mind for the present, so that they continued to endure the darkness that day in their sad and doleful condition. Well, towards evening, the giant went down into the dungeon again to see if his prisoners had taken his advice. But when he walked into the dungeon, he found them alive, but just barely so, because they were in such need of bread and water, plus the brutal wounds they had received when he beat them left them unable to do much other than to breathe a little. But as I said, he found them alive, and it put him in a furious rage, and he threatened them because they had disobeyed his advice. It will be worse for you now than if you had never been born. At this, the two terrified pilgrims trembled, and I think Christian fell into a swoon. But when he revived a little, they renewed their discussion about the giant's advice and whether it might be best now to take it or not. Once again, Christian seemed in favor of doing it, but Hopeful made a second reply against it. "My brother," he said, "think about how valiant you have been on this journey until now. Apollyon could not crush you, nor could all that you heard, saw, or felt in the valley of the shadow of death. What hardship, terror, and amazement you have already gone through. Are you now nothing but a bundle of fears? You see that I am imprisoned in the dungeon with you, and I am a far weaker man by nature than you are. Also, this giant has wounded me as well as you, and has also withheld bread and water from my mouth. Together we mourn without the light, but still let us exercise a little more patience. Remember how you played the man at Vanity Fair, and were neither afraid of the shackles nor the cage. You weren't even afraid of bloody death. Therefore, let us at least avoid the giant's advice and bear up with patience as well as we can." Night fell again, and the giant and his wife Diffidence were in bed. She asked him about the prisoners, and if they had taken his advice and killed themselves. "They are sturdy scoundrels," he replied. "They chose to bear all hardships rather than to take their own lives. Take them into the castle yard tomorrow and show them the bones and skulls of those whom you have already dispatched, and promise them that before 2 weeks go by, you will tear them in pieces, as you have done to other pilgrims before them."